The rain fell so hard that the city lights blurred into streaks of gold and white. As Evelyn stood outside the hospital, clutching a thin envelope that contained the final divorce agreement she had signed only hours before, her fingers trembled, not because of the cold, but because she had just watched the man who had loved her with every breath walk away without looking back. Adrian had once promised her that no matter what happened, he would always wait for her to come home. Yet today he left with silent eyes that no longer carried hope. She had been too proud to stop him, too stubborn to admit she was wrong, too blind to notice that the people whispering poison into her ears had never cared about her happiness. She remembered every cruel word she had thrown at him over the past 3 years. She accused him of marrying her for status, even though he was the one who built his fortune from nothing. She ignored every meal he cooked after long days at work. She laughed whenever her so-called friends mocked his quiet personality. She even believed forged photographs that suggested he had another woman. Every lie had pushed him farther away until his warm smile disappeared completely. Now she finally knew the truth. Her younger cousin Lily had confessed everything only an hour earlier, crying uncontrollably after guilt consumed her. She admitted that she had edited the fake photographs, spread rumors, and manipulated situations because she had secretly loved Adrian herself. Evelyn wanted to scream. She wanted to run after her husband and beg him to forgive her, but she was too late. Adrian had already boarded a flight for another country to oversee a new international project. The hospital call she had received, minutes later, shattered what remained of her strength. Her grandmother, the only person who always believed Adrian was innocent, passed away peacefully after whispering one final sentence. "If there is another life, don't lose the right person again." Those words echoed endlessly inside Evelyn's heart as she stumbled into the rain. She could barely breathe. Every memory became another knife, twisting deeper inside her chest. She remembered the winter morning Adrian secretly waited outside her office for 4 hours because she forgot her scarf. She remembered how he learned to cook dishes from her childhood hometown because she once mentioned missing them. She remembered how he silently donated millions to the children's hospital where her grandmother received treatment without ever telling anyone. He never defended himself because he believed love was proven through actions instead of arguments. She had mistaken his patience for weakness. Tears streamed down her face as she stepped onto the empty road without noticing the speeding truck approaching through the heavy rain. Tires screeched. Headlights exploded across her vision. Pain lasted only a second before everything became silent. She expected darkness forever. Yet instead she heard familiar voices arguing nearby. "Miss Evelyn? Miss Evelyn? Wake up! The wedding ceremony starts in an hour." Her eyes snapped open. She gasped violently and sat upright. The elegant bedroom around her was impossible to mistake. The white wedding dress hanging beside the window. The perfume bottles lined across the vanity. The bouquet of white roses she had chosen years ago. Her heartbeat became wild. She rushed toward the mirror and nearly collapsed. Looking back at her was a 24-year-old version of herself, untouched by regret, wearing the excited face she once had before marrying Adrian. She grabbed the calendar from the bedside table. The date made her knees give out. It was her wedding day. Somehow impossible. Somehow unbelievable. She had returned to the day everything began. She slapped her own face, thinking it must be a dream. But the sharp sting proved otherwise. Her maid looked confused. "Miss, are you nervous?" Evelyn could barely answer. Her hands shook uncontrollably as memories of her previous life flooded into her mind with terrifying clarity. She knew every mistake she would make over the next 3 years. Every lie people would tell. Every opportunity she would waste. Every heartbreaking moment leading to Adrian's lonely departure. This time would be different. She didn't care if nobody believed her. She would protect him with everything she had. She would love him openly. She would never let anyone come between them again. Downstairs, Guests laughed while expensive music filled the mansion. In her previous life, she had entered the ceremony with hesitation because she believed the marriage was only a business arrangement between powerful families. Today, she ran downstairs before anyone could stop her. The guests stared in surprise as she rushed through the decorated hall, searching desperately for one person. Then she saw him. Adrian stood quietly near the altar, in a perfectly tailored black suit. His expression remained calm, but she recognized the uncertainty hidden behind his eyes. In her previous life, she ignored that expression. She never realized he feared she might reject him publicly, because he knew she never truly wanted the marriage. Before anyone understood what was happening, Evelyn sprinted across the aisle. Her veil slipped behind her as tears poured endlessly from her eyes. Adrian looked startled just before she threw herself into his arms and hugged him with every ounce of strength she possessed. The guests gasped loudly. Cameras flashed nonstop. Adrian froze completely. "Evelyn?" he whispered. She buried her face against his chest exactly where she remembered hearing his heartbeat thousands of times before losing him forever. "I'm sorry," she cried over and over. "I'm so sorry." Adrian gently touched her shoulders, worried she was having a panic attack. "You don't have anything to apologize for." She looked up at him through tear-filled eyes and almost cried harder. Even after everything she would eventually do to destroy him, this man still comforted her first. Her heart broke all over again. "Promise me," she whispered shakily, "that no matter what happens, you'll always tell me the truth. Never keep your pain hidden from me." Adrian smiled softly, believing it was simply wedding anxiety. "I promise." She smiled through tears because she knew how precious those words truly were. During the ceremony, she never looked away from him once. Instead of politely exchanging vows like before, she held both his hands tightly and spoke from the depths of her soul. "I promise to trust you before trusting anyone else. I promise to stand beside you when the whole world stands against you. I promise that if I ever hurt you, I will be the first to apologize. I promise that I will spend every day proving that marrying you is the greatest blessing of my life." Silence filled the hall. Many guests wiped away tears. Adrian himself seemed speechless. Nobody knew those promises came from a woman who had already lived once and paid the cruelest price imaginable for breaking every one of them. After the ceremony, while photographers arranged family portraits, Lily approached wearing the same innocent smile Evelyn once believed without question. "Congratulations, cousin," Lily said sweetly, while secretly glancing toward Adrian. In her previous life, Evelyn would have hugged her warmly. This time she simply smiled politely. "Thank you." Lily leaned closer. "You know, if you ever get tired of such a boring husband, handsome men don't stay single for long." The sentence sounded playful to everyone nearby, but Evelyn knew exactly where it would eventually lead. She looked directly into Lily's eyes with a calm confidence that hadn't existed before. "You're right," she replied. "That's exactly why I'll never let him go." Lily's smile faltered for just a moment. It was almost invisible, but Evelyn noticed every tiny crack. The game had already changed. That evening, Adrian drove them to the villa that would become their first home together. In the previous life, she spent the journey staring at her phone, barely speaking to him. Tonight, she watched him instead. The gentle way he focused on driving, the quiet hum of his favorite song, the habit of checking whether she was comfortable every few minutes. Small details she once ignored now felt more valuable than diamonds. When they arrived, Adrian opened the passenger door for her. She suddenly wrapped her arms around him again. He laughed awkwardly. "Another hug?" She nodded. "I'm making up for lost time." He smiled without understanding those words. Inside the beautifully decorated house, candles illuminated every room. Fresh flowers filled the air with a soft fragrance. Adrian admitted shyly that he personally arranged everything because he wanted her first night there to feel unforgettable. In her previous life, she criticized the decorations for being too simple. Tonight she burst into tears instead. Adrian panicked immediately. "Did I do something wrong?" She shook her head repeatedly before holding his face gently between her hands. No, you're perfect. Those 3 words left Adrian completely stunned because he had never expected to hear them. As night settled outside and silence wrapped around the villa, Evelyn stood beside the bedroom window, watching stars appear one by one. She silently thanked fate, heaven, or whatever mysterious force had granted her another chance. She didn't know why she had been chosen. She didn't know whether destiny could truly be rewritten. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. In this lifetime, even if the entire world tried to take Adrian away from her again, she would be the one chasing him, protecting him, loving him without hesitation, because she had already experienced a life where she lost her true love once. And she would never survive losing him a second time. The next morning, Evelyn woke before sunrise, not because of excitement, but because fear still lingered deep inside her heart. Every peaceful moment felt fragile, as though fate might suddenly decide to return everything to the miserable path she remembered. She turned her head slowly and saw Adrian sleeping beside her. His expression was relaxed, his breathing calm, one arm resting across the blanket exactly as it had in her previous life. Tears quietly filled her eyes. She reached out carefully and held his hand. It was warm, real, alive. She whispered to herself that this was not a dream. She still had time to protect him. Adrian slowly opened his eyes and smiled sleepily. "You're awake already?" Evelyn nodded before surprising him again by leaning forward and kissing his forehead. Adrian blinked several times in confusion. During their engagement, she had always kept a respectful distance, and he had prepared himself for a cold marriage built on obligation rather than affection. Yet from the moment they married, she seemed like an entirely different woman. "Is something different?" he asked softly. Evelyn smiled. "Everything is different." Adrian chuckled without understanding. "I suppose marriage changes people." She looked at him with a mixture of happiness and sorrow. "Sometimes it gives people a second chance." He thought she meant emotionally, and simply squeezed her hand. After breakfast, the 2 families gathered for the traditional post-wedding celebration. The mansion was crowded with relatives, business partners, and family friends. Evelyn remembered every face. She knew exactly which smiles were sincere and which hid selfish motives. She also remembered who would betray Adrian in the future. One of them was her uncle Victor, who constantly praised Adrian in public while secretly working with competitors to destroy his company. In her previous life, she defended Victor every time Adrian questioned him. This time, she quietly watched every move. Victor approached with his usual charming smile. "Adrian, congratulations. I hope our families will make many successful investments together." Adrian politely thanked him. Victor extended his hand, but Evelyn suddenly stepped between them. "Uncle, isn't your overseas project having financial problems?" Victor's smile stiffened. "Who told you that?" Evelyn calmly picked up a glass of juice. "I heard rumors. I hope they're false." Several influential businessmen nearby overheard the conversation and glanced curiously toward Victor. He laughed awkwardly. "Just meaningless gossip." Evelyn smiled sweetly, but inside she knew exactly what had happened. In her previous life, Victor borrowed enormous amounts of money using fake guarantees before disappearing overseas, leaving Adrian responsible for millions in losses. This time, she would never allow that trap to happen. Adrian noticed her thoughtful expression once Victor walked away. "Do you distrust your uncle?" he asked. Evelyn answered honestly. "I trust your judgment more than anyone else's." Adrian looked genuinely surprised. "Even more than your own family's?" She nodded without hesitation. "Especially more than my own family." Those words echoed in Adrian's mind long after the conversation ended. He had expected years of proving himself worthy of her trust, yet somehow he already possessed it. Later that afternoon, Lily entered the garden wearing an elegant white dress and deliberately sat beside Adrian while Evelyn was greeting guests. She laughed brightly at every joke and lightly touched his arm whenever she spoke. It was exactly how everything began in Evelyn's previous life. By the end of that year, Lily would convince everyone they were simply close friends, and eventually Evelyn herself would believe the carefully crafted misunderstandings. But this time, Evelyn calmly walked over, wrapped one arm around Adrian's shoulder, and smiled warmly. "Honey, everyone is waiting for us inside." Adrian stood immediately. "Of course." Before leaving, he politely nodded toward Lily. "Excuse us." Lily watched them walk away together, her expression darkening for only a second before she forced another innocent smile. That evening, Adrian invited Evelyn onto the balcony, overlooking the city. The lights shimmered beneath the night sky, while a gentle breeze carried the scent of fresh flowers. Adrian handed her a small velvet box. "This wasn't part of the wedding gifts," he said shyly. "I wanted to give it to you privately." Evelyn slowly opened the box. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a tiny sapphire heart hanging from it. She instantly remembered it. In her previous life, she barely glanced at it before placing it inside a drawer, where it remained untouched until after the divorce. Only then did she discover an engraving hidden on the inside. With trembling fingers, she turned the bracelet over. There it was, forever choosing you. Her vision blurred. Adrian became nervous. "You don't like it?" Evelyn immediately shook her head and threw her arms around him. "I love it." Adrian laughed softly. "You're crying again. Because nobody has ever loved me the way you do." Adrian gently brushed a tear from her cheek. "I hope I'll spend the rest of my life proving that." She silently promised herself that this time he actually would. Several weeks passed peacefully. Evelyn began working alongside Adrian at the company, claiming she wanted to understand the family business. In reality, she remembered countless future events that would affect the company. Whenever she subtly warned Adrian about risky partnerships, suspicious contracts, or dishonest executives, her predictions somehow proved correct every single time. Adrian became increasingly impressed by her instincts. During one board meeting, an executive insisted on investing hundreds of millions into a technology startup. Evelyn recognized the company immediately. In her previous life, it collapsed 6 months later after its founder fled with investor money. She calmly interrupted the discussion. "Have their financial reports been independently verified?" The room fell silent. After further investigation, Adrian discovered massive accounting fraud. The investment was canceled just days before the scandal became public nationwide. The board praised Adrian's wisdom, but he privately asked Evelyn how she knew something was wrong. She smiled mysteriously. "Call it intuition." Adrian looked at her thoughtfully. "Your intuition keeps saving me." She lowered her eyes, hiding the pain inside. If only he knew she had learned every lesson through unbearable regret. One rainy evening, they returned home after a long day at work. The electricity suddenly went out as thunder shook the sky. In the darkness, Adrian searched for candles while Evelyn stood frozen. The sound of heavy rain instantly reminded her of the night she died. Her breathing became uneven. Her hands started shaking uncontrollably. Adrian noticed immediately. "Evelyn?" She tried to answer but couldn't. The memory of headlights rushing toward her flashed through her mind. Adrian quickly found a flashlight and hurried back. Seeing her pale face, he gently held both her shoulders. "Talk to me." Without thinking, she buried herself against his chest. "Please don't leave me." Adrian wrapped his arms around her protectively. "I'm right here." She closed her eyes tightly, listening to his heartbeat. "Promise you'll come home safely every day." He kissed the top of her head. "I promise. Promise you'll never disappear. I promise. Promise you'll grow old with me." Adrian smiled gently, despite not understanding the fear behind her words. "That was always my plan." She cried quietly until the storm ended. Adrian stayed beside her the entire time without asking unnecessary questions. He simply remained there, offering silent comfort exactly as he always had. The following week, Evelyn secretly visited her grandmother's grave. Kneeling before the stone, she placed fresh white lilies beside it. "Grandma," she whispered, "I listened this time. You told me not to lose the right person again. I won't." A gentle breeze rustled through the trees. Evelyn smiled through tears, feeling strangely at peace. As she turned to leave, she noticed someone standing several meters away. It was Lily. Their eyes met across the cemetery. Lily smiled politely, but there was something calculating hidden beneath her expression. Evelyn immediately understood that her cousin had followed her. The game was becoming more dangerous. Lily slowly walked closer. "You're visiting Grandma often lately." Evelyn nodded calmly. "She gave me the best advice of my life." Lily tilted her head. "What advice?" Evelyn looked directly into her eyes. "She taught me to recognize fake people before they destroy what's truly valuable." For the first time, Lily's smile disappeared completely. Neither woman spoke another word. They simply stared at one another, both realizing that whatever invisible battle had once ended in tragedy had already begun again. Only this time, Evelyn was no longer the naive woman who would blindly hand over her happiness to someone smiling with a knife hidden behind her back. The following morning, Evelyn arrived at the company earlier than everyone else, carrying 2 cups of coffee exactly the way Adrian liked it. She smiled as she watched him through the glass walls of his office. Even before the workday officially began, he was already reviewing contracts, answering emails, and preparing for meetings that would keep him busy until late at night. In her previous life, she had complained that he loved work more than he loved her, never realizing that every extra hour he spent in the office was to build a secure future for them. This time, instead of feeling neglected, she felt guilty for never appreciating his sacrifices. She quietly entered his office and placed the coffee on his desk. Adrian looked up in surprise. "You didn't have to come this early," Evelyn smiled. "I wanted to." Adrian studied her face for a moment before saying, "You're changing my daily routine." She laughed softly. "Hopefully for the better," he nodded. "Definitely for the better." They shared breakfast together while discussing the day's schedule. Adrian mentioned an important negotiation with a large investment group arriving from overseas. The moment he said the company's name, Evelyn's heart skipped a beat. She remembered them perfectly. In her previous life, they had pretended to be strategic partners while secretly collecting confidential information that nearly destroyed Adrian's business. She remained calm and asked casually, "Have they requested access to the company's research division?" Adrian looked surprised. "Actually, yes. They insisted on touring it this afternoon." Evelyn quietly set down her coffee. "Please don't allow it until every document has been reviewed." Adrian frowned slightly. "Do you think something is wrong?" She couldn't explain that she remembered a future that no longer existed, so she simply replied, "Sometimes the people who smile the most are the ones hiding the sharpest intentions." Adrian didn't question her further. Over the past few weeks, her instincts had proven remarkably accurate. When the meeting began later that afternoon, Adrian politely limited the visitors to public areas of the company. One executive became visibly irritated, insisting that complete transparency was necessary for cooperation. Adrian refused with professional courtesy. 2 days later, news broke that the same investment group had been investigated for stealing industrial technology from several corporations across Asia. The board members praised Adrian's caution, but he knew exactly who deserved the credit. That evening, while driving home, Adrian glanced toward Evelyn several times before finally asking, "Who are you?" She blinked in confusion. "Your wife," he smiled. "I know that. But sometimes it feels like you've lived through everything before it happens." Evelyn's fingers tightened around the bracelet he had given her. Maybe some people only understand what's precious after imagining what it would feel like to lose it. Adrian reached across the center console and gently held her hand. "Then I hope neither of us ever has to find out." Tears quietly gathered in her eyes again. If only he knew she already had. A few days later, Evelyn received an unexpected invitation to lunch from Lily. Remembering everything that had happened in her previous life, she accepted without hesitation. She wanted to know how much of the old timeline still remained. They met at an elegant restaurant overlooking the river. Lily smiled warmly, as though nothing had ever been wrong between them. "You've been different since the wedding," Lily observed while stirring her tea. Evelyn smiled politely. "Marriage changes people." Lily leaned forward slightly. "Or maybe you're pretending to be someone you're not." Evelyn calmly met her gaze. "What makes you say that?" Lily shrugged. "You used to complain about Adrian all the time. Now you look at him like he's the only man in the world." Evelyn answered without hesitation. "Because he is." For just a moment, Lily's expression hardened before she forced another smile. "You're lucky." Evelyn noticed the bitterness hidden behind those simple words. She knew jealousy had already begun consuming her cousin again. As lunch continued, Lily casually mentioned an upcoming charity gala, where many influential business leaders would attend. Evelyn instantly remembered the event. That night, in her previous life, a photographer captured Adrian helping an intoxicated woman into a hotel room after she became dangerously ill. The woman was actually one of Lily's friends, and the carefully cropped photographs later became the fake evidence that convinced Evelyn her husband was unfaithful. This time, she silently welcomed the opportunity. The evening of the gala arrived. The ballroom glittered beneath crystal chandeliers, while elegant music echoed through the enormous hall. Adrian spent most of the night meeting investors and speaking with charity organizers. Evelyn never left his side. Lily watched from across the room, clearly frustrated that she couldn't separate them. Later in the evening, one of Lily's friends deliberately spilled wine across her dress and pretended to become dizzy.